This call is being recorded.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our weekly Friday morning Master the Basics of Stock Market Research get together or webinar. I'm Hoda, your host. I'm co-founder and CEO of StockCard, and I am the portfolio publisher behind our flagship portfolio on StockCard's portfolio store called Roll with Our CEO portfolio. So I'm very happy to have you all here. Today, I went through the questions that were submitted through the sign up process for the webinar. There were a lot of questions about how would you use StockCard as an early investor or as a new investor to do a couple of things. One is how would you go about finding interesting and new investment ideas or companies? Because a lot of people are feeling overwhelmed by numbers of conversations that happen about new stocks and new companies on things like Facebook groups or even news and online media and financial media and anywhere or everywhere that you collect your information. And then the second type of questions were about once I have a company that I'm interested in, how do I go about evaluating that company? And how do I make sure what I'm investing in is actually a good company? What are the information I need to look at and how StockCard can help me get there? And so today I thought we can go through those two questions and use a StockCard to answer those questions. And at the end of the conversation, happy to address other questions that you might have. If you're live on this podcast, on this webinar, I always say podcast because we do a lot of podcasting here, Renegade Investors Podcast, if you haven't listened to it yet. But anyways, if you have any questions, make sure to use the panel on the right hand of your screen to submit and put your question in. And I will check in with the questions every now and then and make sure I can get them answered. Or the other thing you can do is to submit after the podcast, after the webinar. My email is hoda@stockcard.io, or you can join our Facebook group, Intelligent Investors Facebook group, and then we can get your questions answered either through one-on-one conversation or through our online chat on Facebook group or elsewhere. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the two questions that we talked about. Number one question that I want to answer, as I said to you guys just a second ago, is how would you go about using StockCard to find interesting companies or tickers for investing? And that's something that we have worked a lot with my team. We put a significant amount of time into trying to answer that question with our tool process to get to interesting investment ideas and companies and tickers as easy, as accurate, and as painful as possible. Actually, as not painful, but as the least amount of painful that possible. And let me just share with you how we did that. When you're looking for a new investment idea that you just have in your mind, you can come on the StockCard search page. And StockCard search page is where we show all of the stock cards that are already available on a StockCard platform. And, when you come to StockCard search, you could scroll down and there is thousands. As you scroll, there's more and more show up. Thousands of stock cards are already published. So this is and tickers point of view, but obviously it's going to be painful if you want to just scroll down and scroll down and scroll down, and it's very hard to find what you're looking for. It's almost like when you go on Netflix, there are thousands of movies and shows available. You don't really just to scroll and scroll and scroll to find something interesting. This is the same concept. The easiest one is just to start searching. And if you don't have a ticker in mind, which is this question we're trying to answer, is that you just exploring, you can search by concept. So for example, maybe you've heard about something like semiconductors. So you could just start typing semiconductors. Let me put this here. Semiconductors. And on this box here, you see stock card collections. And we have grouped stock cards or companies available out there so you see that you could find the semiconductor inspection equipment stocks. You could look for semiconductor equipment material. You could just basically look for semiconductors, analog semiconductors, all sort of different themes within the semiconductor segment. You can search anything here, and I've seen our users search for very interesting terms. For example, we've seen people look for pizza, so you can find probably pizza companies there. I've seen people look for things like renewable energy, renewable energy. So that's available here. And in a second, I will click on one of them when we get there. But as I said, you could search everything here, or if you have no idea what you're looking for, we give you some examples of such tickers or such themes available. These are featured themes in here. We call them collections. These are the themes that we found interesting, or we thought there's good companies involved in those themes. So as you see, autonomous cars is one, 3D printing, stocks, fuel cells, renewable energy, investors in Lyft. That's another interesting one. Legal, marijuana, esport, anyways, and then semiconductor we talked about. There's at least 30 that we feature at every point of time in these collection section, and that should help you find interesting investment ideas if you don't know where to start at all. Now let's just kind of go through one of these things. So let's say you're interested in semiconductor stocks. You click. You search, and you can find it here. You click. What it happens is that as you see, all the published stock cards that are available out there are now filtered based on the concept of or theme of semiconductors. So these companies here are all companies that are available already on a stock card platform, and they're all around the theme of semiconductors. But of course, when you get here, from thousands, now you narrow it down to a few, but still there's tons of stocks in here. And as the stock card platform grows and we add more and more companies to the platform, even a search term may result to hundreds of stocks. So you're narrowed down your universe to a smaller amount of stocks, but maybe it's taking a lot of time. So that's why these advanced filters come in place. We've put some interesting advanced filters available here that I want to show you that usually you don't find them elsewhere on other screener platforms. One thing is, depending on your budget, if you're looking for different companies that you can afford to pay, so I'm not saying whether the company is cheap or expensive, but I'm saying if you have only $100 budget, and you want to buy a stock that is less than 100, you can just use this search term to find them. The other thing that is not available mostly in a lot of other platforms is these 4: market potential, company strength, investment return, and per share price of a company. So these are basically filtering all the companies that you see on the stock platform based on these criteria. So, for example, company strength. Most investors, especially long-term investors, they're looking for well-managed companies with strong operations. So although there is thousands of companies available out there, you don't necessarily want to invest in companies that have suboptimal operations. So one of the things I personally do after I use a theme like semiconductors, I just filter the whole universe that is now available to me based on strong operations and then stable operations, right? I want to, right off the bat, eliminate companies that are struggling operationally or there's limited information available about their operations. So now let's just apply this filter, and then you see the overall universe of stocks now is being filtered by semiconductor themes, and then only showing us companies that have strong operations or have a stable, neutral operations, as you see here. Now still we have quite a bit of companies out there, but at least we've eliminated some of the issues that we don't want, or some of the stocks that we don't want to even spend time on them. The next, I personally usually do when I'm looking for interesting investment ideas is look at investment return. The reason is it's interesting to know that when a company has been able to create good investment return in the past, it's a very good indicator that this company can continue to be a well-performing company, especially now that you are having strong companies that are strongly managed or have a stable operations, right? So a stable operations or strong operation plus history of past good investment return usually is the universe that I start personally to find interesting investment ideas. We will talk about whether the stock price is overvalued or undervalued and when is the right time to invest in them, and that depends on what kind of investor you are. But for me, I always want to focus on companies in growing sectors like semiconductors with stable or strong operations, but also the companies that have a history of creating good investment return for the investors in the past, and I return for the investors in the past. And I usually include neutral as well, because if you have a strongly managed company from an operational point of view in a growing sector such as semiconductor, even a neutral market performance or neutral investment performance in the past, they're good indicators of this is a well-operated company. So I use good and neutral and apply this filter. And again, now we're like just down to quite a few stocks that is left in here. The last thing I do most of the time, and this is one of my favorite ways of finding investment ideas, is to look for companies that are undervalued. So I click on first share price section of the Stockard advanced filters, and then I look for companies that their first share price is good or it's basically undervalued. I click on that, apply, and now I have this very interesting 5-6 companies available to me in a growing sector such as semiconductor that have either strong or stable operations and have been able to, in the past, either overperform the market or being in the vicinity of the return of the market. And maybe more importantly for us to explore and find interesting companies is that their first share price is under the current, basically their first share price is higher than the current share price, or the stock price is undervalued. So now I have this universe of stocks. So these are probably something that you want to start exploring and figuring out whether though you want to invest in. Now let me just do a quick another filter to find some interesting companies to explore. So I'm going to reset the filters, and then I'm going to restart the collections. I could have just click on this here and go back to all the thousands that were available. So maybe now today I'm interested in companies that are in the esports segment, or basically theme, because I believe esports can be a market-beating segment in the future. And the second thing I want to do, as I told you before, is that I want to make sure I'm focusing on companies with good operations or stable operations. So I applied that filter. And then lastly, companies that at this point of time or in the past have been able to create good investment return for investors. So I applied that. And then now you see I have only two companies left. One is Capcom and the other one is Tencent Holdings. And in the esports market with stable operations or strong operations that are their price is already on their valued. Now, let me pause here to see whether there is any questions from you guys. And if you have any questions, please make sure to submit your question using the question panel. There's like a little chat icon available on Uber Conference where you're basically watching this. I want to make sure that if there's any question, I get all that answered. Before I jump in to the next part of the question. Okay. Let me just type it here. Any questions? Please feel free to submit here so that you can actually see it. All right. So while you're submitting your questions, let me continue this recording or this webinar by now getting into the second part. So everything I've done from start of this webinar until now was in response to the question of how do I use a stock card to find interesting investment ideas without getting overwhelmed, and do it without making mistakes. And then, which is, once I find an interesting company, how do I make sure this company is actually worth my investment dollars? What do I need to pay attention to in order to make a good investment decision? So from the previous exploration we did, we ended up with Tencent and Capcom. So I want to click on Capcom because maybe Capcom is a company that it's not very well known to a lot of us. So it would be interesting to have a look and see what's this company all about. I click on Capcom and you will see the company's stock card will show up. This is what we call a stock card. Every publicly traded company in a stock card platform gets this one pager. This is an interactive tool, and I will show you why I call it interactive, that summarizes and visualizes all the information you would need about that publicly traded company in order to make a good investment decision. So let's take a look. What's on this first page? This is Capcom. The ticker is CCOEY, and it's an OTC market, it's an over-the-counter market. So most likely this is a foreign company that is being listed in what's called over-the-counter stock exchanges in the United States. So it's not a NASDAQ or it's not a NYSE or New York Stock Exchange. It's a smaller over-the-counter stock exchanges. The company's data on the stock card was lastly researched on January 9th of 2019. So it's shorter, I guess it's just a couple of months since the last time it's being refreshed. And this is obviously the stocks chart or the price chart. And what's very important that we would want to pay attention to is these four boxes. There are four things: market potential, company's strength, share price, and investment return. And you're probably already familiar with this because in the previous step or the question we were trying to answer, we talked about, we can filter companies based on their company's strength or based on investment return or per share price. We didn't talk about market potential, but we could have basically filtered companies based on their market potential. So this is the same thing. This is where these are the information we were using to filter the companies. So just in one look, the CAP is operating in a market that its potential, it's not green, but it's not red either, right? It's a stable and growing market most likely. And later on, we click on this CY, and we will see why. The company, as we expect, because that was what we researched or what we filtered, has a strong operation. The company has been able to create great investment return, higher than the average of the market in the past, and the company's share price is not overvalued or undervalued. It's probably rightly priced. So by one look right over here, you probably have got a lot of good information about whether you're even interested to learn about Capcom or not. Interested to learn about Capcom or not. So let's just dig a little bit deeper. If you are interested about why the companies, or any of these things by that matter, why this company has a strong operation, you could click on CY, and this is where the interactivity comes in place. And you see the reason the company's operation is strong is because of something. Leadership quality is green. Sales growth is relatively stable. Earnings per share, which is basically profitability of the company, it's good. Cash availability is good. The company doesn't have issues with cash or debt, most likely. And what I'm saying right now, they're all also listed on this part, right, in this section. Revenue diversity is in a stable place, and from a competitive company, it's not super like monopolistic competitive, but it also has something to defend its competitive advantage against competitors. And if among any of these things or anywhere in the Stockcard platform that you come across terms that you may not understand, there's always this eye icon that you can click and see what that term means. For example, if you don't know why revenue diversity is a good indicator of companies' operational strengths, you could click on that eye icon and it explains having diverse sources of revenue is a good thing. It means the company has more than one way to make money. Great businesses do not rely on one source of revenue or find themselves dependent on only a handful of customers. So that's why it's important to take a look at the detailed information behind every aspect that you see on Stockcard, because it would give you a lot more information about the operational strengths of that company. And now since we read revenue diversity, we can still, if you're questioning why the company's revenue diversity is not as good, it's not green, why it's just as stable, you click on CY, and then you see another layer of the information pops up or opens up. And in there, you can see that the company has multiple revenue segments. It has 4 revenue segments: digital content, amusement facilities, so basically amusement parks, like similar to what Disneyland is, amusement machines, so this is probably arcade type and some other, this is probably where things like eSport and things fall. And then so that's good. The company has multiple sources of revenue. Another thing that is not good about it is that the company is dependent on a handful of customers. So this says Capcom dependent on Field Corporation for its distribution, which is more than 10% of the company since 2017, which was when the data was pulled from. And so that's why it's not green. As you see, there is one good data point and there's one bad data point, and this one, there's no information available. So kind of balance these two out, and then you get something that's not as so good, but it's not bad either. And every time, everywhere on a stock card, if you ever find yourself questioning and wanting to know the source of that information, you could always click on this source boxes here, and then we'll show you where the information was pulled from. So this number of revenue segment for Capcom was pulled from the company's annual report, and you can even click on it, and then it will just directly take you to the company's investor relation page, and then you'll be able to download the company's annual report from the investor relation page of the company's website. So everywhere on the platform, anywhere you go, if you're interested in terms of the source, you could click on the source. If you don't understand the terminology, you could click on the eye icon and understand what that is about. And that's how we reduce. We've done something that we can do using technology to bring the information and visualize the information for you in a way that you can make good investment decisions without feeling overwhelmed or without it taking a lot of time out of you. The other thing we didn't talk about is that if you don't even know Capcom, what the Capcom is, what this company is all about, or any company, there's also this thing that's called key information. And if you click on it, it basically takes you this section of every stock card that tell you about, first of all, who Capcom is. So you could learn that Capcom is a manufacturer and distributor of electronic game machines, and it's involved in video game industry, offices in Tokyo, Osaka, California, England, Germany, and Hong Kong. You can see, before when we were filtering based on esports. So it says this is where the sport is. So it says this company belongs to video game theme, entertainment and media theme, esports, we've seen it, technology, and electronic gaming and multimedia. And so on all the stock cards, there's these collection sections that tell you where or which theme or category, if you wish, that company belongs to. And then there's some other basic information that everybody would want to know about the company. When was the company IPO'd? When did it go public? What is the company's market size or market valuation or market cap? There's different ways of saying this. Headquarter location is in Japan, and which industry, standard industry the company belongs to, which sector, and what is the company's website. So if you ever want to get to know the company, you have it here. Usually there is information or dates. If the company has already announced it, there's dates here that says when is the last earning release date for this company, and then when is the next earning release date for this company. This is basically telling you when you could expect the company's stock card to get refreshed next. This researched on which date. And if the company has already announced those days that are publicly available, they get pulled here and you could get to see them here. And then you could see whether the company is a dividend paying company or not. So the last date as of which you should have been a stock owner in order to be able to be eligible for the stock owner, in order to be able to be eligible for the last dividend payout was 26th of September of 2018. And it's because this company pays dividends on a semi-annual basis. So probably in a couple of weeks from now, this thing's gonna get refreshed because it becomes another semi-annual, I guess, anniversary of the dividend payout, and then these information gets validated. And as long as we're on the topic of the dividends, since a lot of people are interested in the dividend information, we always include the dividend part of the investment return section, because investment return, dividend is part of what you could get. It's part of the return that that company can generate. So under the investment return, which we didn't talk about it now, but I want to click on dividends. And it says why Capcom Ltd or Limited Partnership is a dividend paying company. There are concerns about how it can continue paying dividend or keep up with the yield offered by similar dividend paying companies. So this is, again, saying Capcom is a dividend paying company, but it's not the best dividend paying company. And then you probably want to see why. You could click on it, and then you see the company pays 1.5% dividend yield in the past 12 months, which is good, but it's not like significantly high. And then when you even compare that dividend with other companies that are known as comparable companies to Capcom, it's at least 10% lower, this 1.4%, at least 10% lower of a dividend yield that these benchmark companies or the comparable companies are paying. So that's why you see dividend section is not green, it's just stable, because compared to its competitors, it's paying less. There's a good news about this dividend payout, because in the past 3 years, the company has been increasing its dividend per share by almost 15%. So that's really good. But again, if you compare that to comparable companies to Capcom, it's less than 10%. It's 10%, at least 10% lower than those comparable companies. So you see, every question you have about any publicly traded company, in order to help you make a decision about whether it's a good company or not, is easily and visually available to you on the company's stock card. And this is how you can use every stock card to make a good investment decision. A couple of other things to just tell you or share with you without jumping into the questions is that you could follow every stock card by clicking on this bell icon on the top right corner. And what that following does is that every time this company gets, the information gets refreshed, so this research date, next time this research date changes, so let's say tomorrow there's information become available about Capcom by Capcom, and this stock card gets automatically refreshed, you will, as a follower of that stock card, you will get a little email notification that would tell you that it's time to take a look at Capcom. And everybody talks about these companies, but in reality, nothing fundamentally usually change about the operations or the market or return of these companies. So that's why we created this follow, and we would tell you when is the right time to pay attention to Capcom, because new information becomes available, as opposed to just kind of getting bogged down with the frenziness or tons of conversation that happens on social media or financial media. So make sure when you look at any stock card, after you use that search terms or search and filtering that we talked about, and you landed on a stock card and took a look at it, make sure you follow that stock card so that you know when is the right time to to come back and take a look and see whether the company that either you've invested or you want to pay attention to has new information available. So there's tons of things I can share with you, but I think that's about the time I have today. And I want to get into some of the questions that our webinar participants have submitted, and I see there's quite a lot of them right available. So I'm going to jump there right now. But let me wrap up. You could always use this search box to look for more companies. So you could, again, search for those stock card selections that we talked about, or you could look, now that you look at Capcom, maybe you also want to look at let's say Activision Blizzard, which is the company in the same sector. Say Activision Blizzard, which is the company in the same sector or same collection, esports. So you could just click on that and easily go to the stock card of that company. And here we go. That's the stock card. And there's other things about obviously stock card like portfolio store, track your investment that we didn't talk about today. We didn't talk about the stock card team decision, but maybe those are the things, some of the questions that I can answer in the future webinars. So thanks again for submitting those questions, and I'm gonna go ahead and get to some.